Some stories are so absurd, so ridiculously stubborn that they almost feel like fiction. Two pilots, two amputations, two men who refused to let life tell them enough, and somehow both ended up fighting in World War II like it was a casual Tuesday. Douglas Bader was born in 1910 in England. Flying was still considered a slightly dangerous hobby for rich boys with nerves of steel. And Bader? He had nerves of steel and the kind of ego that could lift a Spitfire on its own. By the 1930s, he was an RAF pilot, young, brash, talented, and accident-prone. During an aerobatic maneuver, he misjudged a low-level roll and slammed into the ground. The crash destroyed his legs, one above the knee, the other below. The RAF politely suggested retirement. Bader looked at his prosthetic legs and said, right, we'll try this again. Walking on prosthetic legs in the 1930s wasn't like strapping on carbon fiber blades. We're talking heavy metal, leather straps, and the constant threat of falling over in public. Yet Bader didn't just walk. He ran, climbed, and somehow convinced the RAF he could still fly a Spitfire in combat. By World War II, Bader was back in uniform. He flew in the Battle of Britain, not just surviving, but excelling. His legs didn't slow him down. They gave him an air of untouchable cockiness. Bader had this insane habit of pulling his Spitfire into impossible maneuvers, sometimes flipping upside down over enemy aircraft just to see if the Germans could follow. Some pilots called him reckless. Others called him a genius. The Luftwaffe probably called him a demon with a stiff upper lip. Bader also had a slightly absurd habit of, quote-unquote, teasing enemy planes. He would fly directly over German airfields at low altitude, flipping them off in code language with his ailerons, which is basically the aviation equivalent of mooning someone politely. It was illegal, dangerous, and gloriously stupid, but somehow it worked. The Germans spent entire days trying to figure out if this man was a pilot or a practical joke sent from God. At one point, he apparently tried to convince a squadron of Messerschmitts to play tag with him mid-air. They did not comply. Then came 1941. During a dogfight over France, Bader's luck finally caught up. Shot down and captured by the Nazis, he was sent to a POW camp. Most prisoners would sit in a cell, maybe play cards, and try to survive. Not Bader. He immediately began plotting escapes. Multiple times, day after day, fence climbing, bribing guards, tunneling with spoons, probably trying to convince a guard to swap uniforms with him using reasoning that only a man with metal legs could pull off. The Germans, fed up, did what any rational person would do. They took his prosthetic legs away. Yes, the Nazis tried to immobilize him. Did it work? Not at all. He still tried escaping on stumps. Eventually, they realized the problem wasn't Bader's legs. It was Bader. They gave him back his legs, and he continued his ridiculous attempts until he was finally moved to Colditz Castle, the escape-proof prison. Even there, Bader never stopped scheming. Some guards later said the man had the energy of 3 caffeinated horses and a grudge against boredom. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Alexei Marisiev was writing his own absurd story. April 5, 1942. Marisiev, flying a Yak-1 fighter, is shot down, probably by German ace Peter Siegler, a man with 48 confirmed kills. Marisiev crashes in a forest, badly wounded, deep behind enemy lines. Any normal human would scream, surrender, or die. Marisiev crawls for 18 days through snow, ice, and injuries so severe that gangrene starts slowly destroying his legs. During this crawl, he apparently stopped to steal food from villages, set small traps for animals, and had time to consider whether anyone had invented boots that could fix themselves. By the time he reaches Soviet-controlled territory, both legs are beyond saving. Surgeons amputate above the knee. He is considered a hopeless case, sheet over his face, everyone already filling out the paperwork, but Marisiev had other plans. He spends nearly a year mastering prosthetic legs, rebuilding strength, balance, coordination, and learning to climb into a fighter cockpit again. By June 1943, he's back in combat, not just flying, he's shooting down enemy planes like it's casual target practice. Flying a World War II fighter was already physically punishing for able-bodied pilots. Spitfires and Yak-1s had pedals that required constant pressure, manual controls that demanded fine motor skills and were extremely unforgiving at high speeds. Pull 5 to 6 Gs and a normal pilot blacks out. Prosthetics in the 1940s were heavy, clunky, and unforgiving. Bader and Marisiev had to operate controls perfectly with artificial legs while dodging machine gun fire and anti-aircraft shells. Imagine Bader upside down, chasing a Messerschmitt, one hand on the stick, one hand adjusting the throttle, legs flailing with metal hooks, all while thinking, I hope the Nazis are enjoying this as much as I am. Or Maresyev crawling for 18 days in snow, knowing if he misjudges a step, he dies of gangrene or frostbite, and still thinking, I will fly again, or I will die trying. Vader's return wasn't just personal, it sent a message. Britain needed legends. RAF pilots, morale on the line, London under attack, and here's a man literally defying physical limitation and the laws of boredom. Every time he flew, the Germans got a little more paranoid, the British a little more inspired. Maresyev became a symbol for the USSR. Propaganda? Sure, but also real. He embodied Soviet resilience in a brutal, unforgiving theater. His story was taught in schools, celebrated in novels, and turned into a movie. This man crawled through hell and came back to shoot down aircraft. Kids were told, you too can crawl through frostbite and terror and still win. Vader also had a weird obsession with daring aerial stunts that made other pilots feel like they were watching an action film on fast forward. At one point, he attempted a formation loop with 4 Spitfires that ended with 2 planes nearly kissing wings at 200 miles per hour. The Germans, of course, mistook it for an elaborate battle tactic. Number it was just Vader being Vader, proving that physics is negotiable when ego and prosthetic legs are involved. Maresyev, on the other hand, reportedly lectured young pilots about how to fly while also thinking about cheese and bread, because apparently long stretches behind enemy lines make one deeply philosophical about snack priorities. Let's not forget the absurdity of dogfighting itself. These planes were death traps with wings that could fold in half if you sneezed wrong. Every maneuver was a calculated gamble against gravity, speed, and a metal bird piloted by someone who might or might not want to murder you politely. And yet, Vader and Maresyev thrived in that chaos. They turned sheer stubbornness and metal prosthetics into tactical advantages. Vader once claimed he could intentionally stall a plane midair to confuse enemy fighters, which is either genius or just insanely stupid, and in his case, it worked. Both men, one British, one Soviet, lost their legs, learned to walk, learned to fly, and went back into combat. One annoyed the Nazis to death, the other made them question whether frostbite was a legitimate threat. They became symbols, stubbornness made manifest. Vader's repeated escapes were basically comedic slapstick if you ignore the danger. Maresyev's survival trek is almost cartoonishly impossible, but somehow, both are 100% true. So remember Douglas Bader and Alexei Maresyev, 2 men, 2 amputations, 2 pilots who proved that the human spirit is a terrible enemy for any bureaucracy, army, or physics professor. Life will knock you down. War will try to take your legs. The universe might hand you an 18-day crawl across enemy forests, but if you're stubborn enough, and maybe a little insane, you'll fly anyway. Legs or no legs, they flew. And the world had no choice but to watch. Legs or no legs, these men flew anyway, and proved that stubbornness can outrun death itself.